It's probably because you need water.
Hey, Josie.
Hey, Mary. How's it going?
Good. Are you in session?
I'm not. I'm here recording a podcast with you.
Oh, that's right. That's just the title of our show.
That's the title of our show.
Oh, there's the intro.
So welcome to Are You in Session? My name is Josie, and I'm a therapist here in Oklahoma City.
What kind of therapist are you?
I'm a marriage and family therapist.
Are you licensed?
I am licensed.
I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist here in Oklahoma City.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, today we are talking about self-care. Who isn't talking about self-care, though?
Literally no one. Everyone's talking about it. So are we going to define it?
Yeah. Okay, so let's define it. I define self-care as... See, this gets me into the track of just what we're going to talk about the whole time. But essentially things you need to do to care for yourself. How would you define it?
How many times are we going to say the word care and
A lot.
yourself? And yeah, probably a lot.
Take a sip of water every time because self-care. Every time we say care.
Yeah. Drink your water.
Yeah.
Hydration. Okay, so how would I define self-care? I would say it's the behaviors that a person engages in that adds to their overall well-being.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
And you defined it without saying self-care is caring for yourself.
I was trying really hard to
all
avoid.
to say.
Trying really hard to avoid.
Yeah.
And thankfully, most people, when they hear the phrase, like, or you ask them the question, what is self-care, they don't have to think long and hard about it because it's self-explanatory. That's what I was trying to say. But I do think maybe sometimes people don't actually understand what good self-care can be versus frivolous self-care.
And that's what I really want to get into today is like, I think sometimes it can be used for an excuse for things, but it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean it is actually helpful.
Right.
So I just want to mention real quick, I think when this is posted later on, there's going to be a couple of attachments added. One is a Psychology Today article that I just really liked how she kind of explained self-care because she mentions like faux self-care is what she says, and how there are things that we often do and it might be a short-term relief, but it's not actually helpful in the long term.
Right.
And something I want to look into more because I didn't really think about it much until you and I were sitting here talking about it a few minutes ago is like, where did the origins of self-care come from? Because
I don't know.
I feel like a few years ago, it was just like, it suddenly became like a
trendy,
trendy phrase. Buzzword. Yeah. Buzz phase.
I was about to say BuzzFeed.
I guess
but
that's
that's
a word. Hyphenated. A buzz hyphenated word.
Right.
And I am curious what the origins, but she mentioned something about how it was originally used to like encourage working women. I mean, she just mentions it in the article, so that's something I want to investigate more of.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Maybe you could write a blog about it afterwards.
Oh yeah, now I have
Follow
to
up.
write Psychology Today reply. And the other attachment is like a little self-care assessment from therapistaid.com, which is just one of my favorites. But I don't, do you ever use this self-care assessment?
I haven't. That was the first time I saw it was when you sent it.
I like it because it really just hits a bunch of different spots of like, are you doing these things generally? And you can like score it. And so it kind of just, I use it with my clients in session. And sometimes if we really need to, we will sit there the whole session and like go through it piece by piece and like, okay, why did you rate it a 1? What would make it a 2 or even a 3? And it can be really helpful. So that was something I just wanted to share with the public.
Man, I love that. So when you are in the role of therapist and you're asking someone or you're evaluating someone's self-care, what do you typically, what do you see people say is self-care versus what are your expectations of what good self-care is?
I would say like 98% of the time when they first, like they're first starting therapy with me, they will say my self-care isn't great, which is part of the reason they're probably coming, right?
Right.
But I always am like, there's got to be something you're doing for yourself.
Right. Do they usually then follow up with, well, I'm here in therapy, so I guess that's one thing?
No.
I hear that a lot.
You hear that a lot? See, I feel like I say that a lot to them. Like, you're also here. And they're like, oh, yeah, that too.
Yeah. Usually it's like the one thing that someone's like,
well, I'm here.
oh, right now, this is it.
Yeah, which is true. Yeah, I feel like a lot of times people come in, they're like, oh, I do this sometimes. Like, it's usually I go on walks, What are the things I feel like I usually hear at first? What do you usually hear at first?
Depends on who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Because I think I hear a mixture of like that faux self-care where it's
Uh-huh.
like, well, I haven't gotten a massage in a really long time. And I'm like, sure, I think that can be a form of self-care, but I also think it can be a very indulgent thing. But usually like, yeah, I go for walks. You know, I might go to the gym or I try to exercise a couple of times a week. Obviously going to therapy. Those are typically the three things like
That you
diet,
hear.
exercise,
Yeah.
tending to their mental health.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes I'll hear people say, I watch my show and I'm like, okay, yeah, like that's fun.
Right.
It's a fun thing for you to do. Is
Right.
it too much? Is
Right.
it stopping
Is
you
it
from doing things like I don't write my notes sometimes when I'm sitting in my
right?
office and I could be. I'm watching
Like, are you
Below Deck.
numbing something and disassociating when you're watching your show, or is
Yeah.
that really like you're giving yourself a break and rest?
Yeah. So I guess maybe let's take a step back and talk about what the point of self-care is. What
okay.
would you say it is?
Yeah. So I would say the point of self-care is doing things that are going to improve your well-being. So that could be physical well-being, that could be emotional well-being, that could be mental well-being. So for me, when I think of self-care, it's not always glamorous. It's honestly not even fun. I think a lot of it, or I compare it to a lot of times like cleaning my house. I don't actually enjoy cleaning, but I love the outcome of cleaning my house. I feel better. I feel put together. I sleep better at night. Like, it's just, the outcome of it is always better for me in the long run. But that means sometimes I have to get on, you know, my hands and knees and scrub my floors and scrub my toilet, and I have to vacuum and I have to dust, and I don't actually like doing that stuff. But I know it's good for me. So that's for me when I think of self-care, is like, what is the thing that I don't actually love doing it, but it still makes me feel really good.
And how is, I'm trying to think, like, as someone who doesn't know much about this, why would it matter to me if I have good physical self-care when I'm here for my mental health?
Well, that's where with us, well, I would say the way you and I think is very, again, systemic, and we've talked about that in other shows, but it's also holistic. You can't neglect one area of your life and expect to be thriving at optimal capacity if your mental health is poor or if your emotional well-being is not being tended to. You can have a healthy diet where you're eating your protein and your vegetables and you're exercising so your heart rate is really good. But if your emotional health is in the trash can, your body's only going to sustain you for so long. Eventually you're going to like start crying at the gym.
Exactly.
And then you're like, it doesn't really matter how much you lift or how far and fast you run. Those emotions are going to catch up to you.
And vice versa. They all play a part together. If like mentally I'm not doing well, eventually my body's going to take that on.
Absolutely.
And then my physical self-care is going to be trash too. And,
Right.
And so that's why like it's important for us as clinicians to, that's why I like this assessment, because it checks all those different boxes. And I do usually laugh with my clients because the emotional self-care one, I'm like, okay, this one like usually is not scored very well because that's why they're here.
Right.
But they also are like, oh, I guess it is good to consider all the other things. They all play a part together. And it's kind of like, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't have great shelter, you're not sustaining, like you're not getting food, you're not going to be thinking about your mental well-being.
Right. So that might be something you have to think about when whether you're the therapist or you're being talked to about self-care, is what is the first like baseline need? Is it your emotional health first, or is it your physical health that we need to tend to? I think a lot of times we come up against this as therapists of like, we can't have someone go into like the emotional depths if they're hungry, and I would say like, think about children at school. We can't have them sit there and try to learn and take tests if they're too distracted by their tummy growling or if they didn't get enough sleep.
I ate right before we did this, right? Because I was like, if I don't know what I'm going to say and lie.
Right.
Yeah.
Self-care, man, is eating.
Yes. There was something I was thinking, like, when it comes to therapy, sometimes I feel like I have clients who are like, I'm ready to do the trauma work. I'm ready to do this. I'm like, hang on a second. We have to make sure that you have a good, like, self-care routine, not just that there's a few things you do every so often. I want to feel confident that you come in here and I know you're going to leave and take care of yourself and be okay, because it gets worse before it gets better. And that's not just to say that, like, it's true.
Right. So that could look like what? Not only what does self-care look like while they're in therapy talking about the hard things, but what does that look like outside, like kind of prep work and post work?
Are you actually asking me, or you're
Okay. Sorry.
I was like, is this just like a broad
Hypothetical?
You know, and of course it varies for everyone, but I feel like a lot of times it's, do you need to be doing some sort of meditation? Hopefully we have practiced enough grounding at this point to where now that we've talked about something really raw, if you feel triggered, you know how to get yourself grounded back in the moment. And we will do that in session too. It'll be, you know, maybe journaling, being aware of the emotions, I think is essentially what I'm usually trying to get my clients to do is like, don't ignore it, you know, let it be present, but don't let it also consume you at the same time. It's like, as long as there's a balance there, whatever self-care needs to happen for that to be the case is what I'm usually looking for.
Yeah, that's great. I think you probably go more emotional self-care is what it sounds like for, like, that's your modality. And I a lot of times do the behavioral self-care. So things that I'm asking, like, have you eaten? Are you getting sleep regularly? Are you going outside and getting fresh air, or are you staying on your devices? Are you eating a lot of fast food, or are you actually, like, maybe taking the time to meal prep or cook good, healthy food?
Yeah.
That's a lot of times where I like to start.
Yeah.
I should be a little bit more like you, though, I think.
Well, I should probably also check in those things. See, this is why we talk.
Yeah.
Learn from each other.
We're a good duo because we do things differently. But if our brains merged together, we'd be, man, everyone better watch out.
Just always do co-therapy.
Ooh, let's try it.
There was something else I was thinking with self-care and clients. I don't know, but do you mind sharing some of your self-care things that you
My
like to
personal
do?
self-care? Yeah. So I think things that I like to do that are my forms of self-care is, again, still very behavioral, but I always try to make sure I'm drinking water.
What's that like?
It's delightful. You know, even if it's, you know, I have a very popular large cup with a handle that every basic female or male, I guess, has. So even if I only drink one of those a day, it's something. I try to be mindful of my caffeine intake because, you know, I could sit and drink coffee and tea all day, but I know it's not good for me. So water is a big important thing. Exercise, I don't like exercising. I like to eat, but I know I have to exercise for my overall physical well-being. So even if I go just a couple of times a week, I think that's really important. I feel better. I feel accomplished. Keeping a clean house is just super important to me. I love making my bed in the morning. That's an easy daily thing. I just feel accomplished. So that's kind of the physical stuff. And then for the emotional side, I think having a therapist is important. Again, I don't always go to therapy consistently every week all the time, but knowing that I have that option is important.
You have that relationship established.
Emotional development and awareness. I, you know, whether it's journaling, whether it's processing through big, heavy emotions with, like, you, a friend, or if, again, my therapist. Another thing that I really like to do is kind of keep tabs on my body. Like, what am I feeling? That's a question I ask oftentimes as a therapist of, like, where do you feel that in your body, or what are you feeling in your body right now? So to have that awareness and not go numb and pay attention, like, what is my body communicating to me? Cause usually it's an indicator of something. Have you heard of the personal chaos index that ITAP has, or we use it a lot for our addiction?
Yeah, I was thinking like personal craziness index.
Same thing.
Okay.
I interchanged the C.
I like it.
Thanks.
I like the chaos more.
I do too. I feel like it's maybe a little bit more like politically correct. But anywho, So we have the PCI is what we call it for short. And I love it because it's got 10 categories. And it's a little bit of the opposite of the self-care assessment, I think, where it's really having you look at what are your indicators when your life is going into chaos. And I have that was part of my training to become a CSAT, which means certified sex addiction therapist. And it's one of my favorite tools and resources that we use, but it's got these 10 categories. And I super love it because once I did it, I was like, oh, I can see for sure where my life gets chaotic.
Yeah.
And one that is actually always communicates loudly to me is my car. So for me, almost like self-care is having my vehicle be a little bit clean and organized and not having a bunch of clutter in it. What do you know about me when we're getting in my car? What do I always say?
Sorry, my car's a mess.
Sorry, my car's a mess.
I'm going to say the same thing.
Right. And like, who doesn't have a messy car? But for me, like, if it's really a mess, I know I'm in trouble and that I'm neglecting something.
Yeah, that's like a physical evidential sign.
Yes.
I'm probably not feeling great.
Yes.
I need to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, a part of my self-care is kind of checking in with my PCI and saying,
That's
hey,
great.
what indicators are going off that are
Maybe
telling
we should
me.
include that on our attachments too.
Yeah, remind me to do that. Also, when Mary says our attachments, you're talking about like the links that you'll find in the bio of the
Right, Hannah?
podcast. Is that right, Hannah?
She said
Hannah's
yes.
nodding.
I have to give Hannah a shout out sometime.
Yeah. Also, we'll figure out, you can Google PCI.
Yeah,
Anywho.
probably.
Yeah, so I would say those are my forms of self-care.
Yeah.
And overall hygiene. I shower regularly, brush my teeth daily, things like that.
Yeah. Basic things that sound simple, but they, in the long run, make a big difference.
Well, I mean, it's the opposite of what you look for when someone's clinically depressed. What are you neglecting? So when someone's healthy, I'm looking for the things, what are you doing regularly that are good for you?
And I personally think it's impossible to do all of your self-care great all the time.
Sure.
I always think like one is just going to be on the lower end of things.
Sure. My
Like
car.
when I go through this assessment, with people, sometimes I'm like, look, like these are not all going to be threes all the time. There is just no way, because life like is going, you have to reprioritize all the time. And that includes self-care. So it's just like, yeah, maybe right now my car is taking a hit and that shows me that I'm maybe not feeling great, but I literally don't have time to clean it. And that's okay, because it's still getting me from point A to point B.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you get to practice some self-care and compassion of like, hey, maybe right now what I need more than to clean my car is to go sit and have dinner with friends or family, or just give myself that.
Yeah, like
grace.
I'm feeling really lonely right now, but like I really should clean, but my car can be cleaned tomorrow. I want to go see my friends.
Right.
Yeah. That's something too I'm consistently like thinking about, honestly, for myself, where if my house is a mess, I'm like, okay, my house is a mess, which isn't making me feel good, but I just don't have a ton of time to clean it right now. So then I have to, like, in my mind, think about what do I need to do to feel okay with this chaos right now? Not that it's always going to be this way.
Right.
Like, I sort of have to ground myself in that of like, this house will be clean at some point.
Right.
It will not be like this forever.
Right.
And sometimes I feel like I have to challenge clients on that, because they're like, well, my house is just a mess. And it's like, okay, it's going to be, but that doesn't have to stop you from doing other things in your life that you need to be doing.
Right.
Like,
right.
I should still brush I would rather brush my teeth every day than have a clean house.
Me
So
too.
if for whatever reason, having a house that is messy means I get to brush my teeth, I don't know how I came up with those two, but I think
if you only have 2 minutes to spare,
I'm going to brush my teeth.
Yeah. It's 2 minutes how long you're supposed to brush your teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So, yeah, I feel like my self-care things, I do like you bringing up the PCI, because that is kind of how I figure out what self-care needs to happen too. Because I'm like, okay, am I watching a lot more Below Deck than usual? Is my house and my car messy? Are my nails chipped? And they've been bugging me for several days, and I still haven't taken the time to paint them when I could take the time to paint them.
Right.
Things like that, where I'm like, okay, I'm avoiding something. I must be feeling more anxious than usual. Like, what do I need to do about that anxiety to feel better?
I think you're onto something, though, asking yourself that question, why am I neglecting some things? What's really going on? I think a lot of times that's part of the self-care, is figuring out, why do I need this? and what's maybe motivating me to not tend to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the uncomfortable part of self-care is you sometimes have to go into the depths and the darkness and figure out, why am I feeling this way? Or why is it really important for me to dig into these emotions? I think that's probably, honestly, if I'm going to like wrap myself out, it's why I don't like doing the emotional side of self-care, because then I have to go to the deep, dark places that I work really hard to keep suppressed. It's why when people are like, ugh, I hate coming to therapy, I'm like, yeah, don't we all?
Yeah.
Because
If
we have to
you
do the
always feel
heavy
comfortable
emotional
going to
work.
therapy, or not comfortable, like you should. I want you to feel comfortable.
Sure.
Well, I always tell people, I want you to feel safe, even though we will have uncomfortable conversations.
If it's not challenging.
Yeah, you want it to be challenging.
So for me, I think when I think about self-care and it being like, a lot of times I tell people like self-care isn't always fun.
Yeah.
What it means, or for me, what that means is like it can be uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of times, like, I think I saw this like meme the other day where it was like, you don't need to get a $7 coffee just because it's a little treat. And then someone replied and was like, looks like someone needs a little treat. I'm like, both are right, kind of, right? I mean, yeah, I don't have to have a $7 coffee to treat myself.
Right.
But if I want it, yeah, I can get it. But is that really self-care? I don't know, because
Not when you
maybe
haven't
I
been
already had
drinking
5
water
cups
all
of
day.
coffee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and so it's all in balance where it's like, just because it's something I enjoy does not mean it is self-care.
Right. I mean, I feel that way. Like, I love when you said, like, why are my nails chipped? And then you said, why am I not taking the time to paint them? Well, yeah, we would say, like, that's a great self-care. It is calming, it's soothing, like having your nails painted makes you feel more put together. You could sit there and say, like, well, every 3 weeks I'm going to get my manicure. And trust me, I would love to do that. My nails are wrecked right now because I've been getting my nails done. But that's not always self-care. That's the frivolous self-care that it's like, that's a bit more self-indulgent. That's not hard. That's just enjoyable. That is a treat. And I'm not saying don't do those things, but don't mistake them for being self-care.
Yeah, like sometimes self-care is, okay, I would rather drink another cup of coffee than drink another cup of water, but in the long run, the water is actually better for me.
Right.
And that is really what self-care is almost maybe sacrificing the things I enjoy a little bit more because
Absolutely.
I know it's going to be better for me.
Right. What's going to have the most long-term positive outcomes? Like,
Yeah.
having that cup of coffee is going to taste really good in the moment. It's going to warm you up, and it might even give you that little boost of energy that you need. But it also may come with not being able to sleep at night, feeling jittery. Too much caffeine can cause your anxiety to spike. And so it's one of those things you have to sit there and measure out the pros and the cons and which one is going to have more of like the positive stuff.
And this is where I'll call myself out a little bit. Just to
We
like,
love honesty here. You're in a
reflect the
safe
point.
place.
So like sometimes when I'm already feeling kind of anxious or like in a maybe just like a darker-ish place, I will know that I'm drinking too much caffeine because I'm already feeling anxious, and then I'm feeling more anxious, but then I like kind of find comfort in that, and I keep like building on it, and then I just sit in that spot of anxiety, which is something that like I try to reflect to people a lot, is like sometimes if we grow up with chaos, we can be a little addicted to it because it's comfortable. It doesn't mean that we want it. It doesn't mean it's actually like good for us, but it's comfortable. It's what I know. And so sometimes if I'm in that spot where I'm like, I'm already feeling bad, I'm just gonna make myself feel worse. Like I recognize, oh, that's because there's a part of me that feels almost safer in that way.
Such a maladaptive like coping skill.
Yeah,
but
yeah, it got me through life somehow, but
Sure.
it doesn't need to still be that way.
Right.
I don't need
Right.
to feel anxious.
Right. So I'm curious because we've talked a lot about self-care kind of from an individual perspective, but we're also the marriage and family side of therapy too.
Yeah.
How do you talk to a relationship or relational clients? Couples is what I'm trying to say, but I'm not trying to limit the type of systems we see. But someone who's not just there individually, what can self-care look like?
That was kind of what I was, earlier when I said, like, sometimes I have clients who come in and, like, want to get into the depths of trauma. And I'm like, hang on, let's, like, stabilize first. I feel that way with couples, too, a lot of the time, where they're like, we need to fix this problem right now. We have to talk about this. And I'm like, I'm still trying to get to know you guys.
Right.
And, like, build a relationship with you. Because in therapy, our relationship is the most important part.
Absolutely.
And so, like, that's just kind of what first comes to mind. But I guess as far as self-care goes with... I'll just say couples for now. I kind of think about like what are things that you guys do together that you enjoy? You can still have arguments and still do things together that you enjoy. And it doesn't take away from each other.
Right.
What
Kind of
about
like,
you?
I guess for me, what I'm thinking of, or what you were talking about made me think of was like love bank type of work.
Yeah, yeah.
Of like, how are you investing in
That's
your
Brotman,
relationship
right?
and
Yeah.
in small ways. So whether it's, you know, holding hands while you're watching a TV show or on a drive, or you're just asking each other, like, hey, how are you doing? Not just a, hey, how are you? Fine, good. But genuinely checking in, doing the small things that tend to the health of the relationship that can be easily overlooked and undervalued, but going back and like recognizing their value in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-care with relationships in general it feels a little bit more vague to pinpoint what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, again, coming to therapy, that's self-care right
Yeah.
there. But I guess also just like in general, when I think of relationships, it's like, have you checked in on this person in a while? Do you guys need some FaceTime? And then like for couples especially, it's like what of your time has been quality? What of your time has been without kids?
Right.
What, even if you don't have a babysitter, what could you intentionally be doing at home? Like there are are a million reasons not to do these things, which oftentimes I hear. I'm guessing you do too.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
like, well, we just don't do this because blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, 5 minutes in the morning. How
Right.
could that look different?
Right. Well, and it's like you said earlier, talking about like the different aspects of self-care, like not every area of the way you care about the things in your life is going to be like the number one priority. But a lot of times when I think about relationships, it's that the relationship has been neglected for far too long. And so maybe you've been focusing too much on your individual self-care or your parenting or your job. So now it's time to give some of the TLC to that relationship now.
Yeah. And I feel like, too, something like you could be doing too much individual self-care, or even if you're not doing enough individual self-care, that can still hurt your relationship, because then your problems basically get vomited onto your partner.
Right.
And we don't want that either.
Right. And it's way easier to take care of a systemic thing when individually you're feeling healthy and taken care of too.
Which is why a lot of times, I think we've mentioned this before, like sometimes when we have couples, we are like, all right, go do some individual work.
Right.
And vice versa. Like, okay, it's gotten to a point where I think individually you're okay, go do some couples work.
Right. Well, and I also think about, for couples, a lot of times, like, they are each other's accountability. So, and I would say, like, even friendships, like you and I, for example, like, if I notice you're not doing well, I might sit there and say, hey, Mary, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Even though I really want to hang out with you. Like, I want for us to go do something together because I enjoy being around you, but I recognize right now that your need is to be doing something individually on your own. So I might say, hey, why don't you go do this and I'll hold down the fort in this area. And when you're ready and taken care of, then like we can go get that dinner and hang out and whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So supporting other people in relationships of just like, selfishly, this is what I would want to do, but I can see you're hurting and this is what you need to do. You probably need to go to the gym.
Right.
Or I don't know.
Go drink some water, Mary.
Go drink some water. I need to drink water today is the message I'm hearing.
Yes, I would love to go get a Starbucks with you, but
my headache is going away because I took ibuprofen. I don't need water now.
Wrong.
Yeah, self-care with couples. I should talk about that with them more often. I feel like I should use those words. Like, what is your relationship self-care?
Yeah.
Because when we see couples, the way we describe it is the relationship is my client. You guys are not my clients. Your relationship is my client.
Right,
So what's the relationship self-care?
I think when I'm in a relational setting, I use the word intentional a lot.
Yeah.
But that's not as self-explanatory as the phrase self-care
Self-care,
is.
yeah. What's your relationship self-care?
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of times when we get in a really bad place in any relationship, sometimes we feel like we can't do these fun or good things because everything else is so bad. But that's not necessarily true. Just because, I'm feeling bad doesn't mean I shouldn't do other things to take care of myself.
Right.
And that's the same with couples. Like, you can go on dates and have fun together and still have problems that you talk
Right.
about in therapy.
Well, I also think, so an exercise that I like to use a lot of times is creating some type of check-in for couples. And it's pretty, I I don't want to say guarded. That's not the right word. But there's some like instructions and what I tell them, like, here are the things you talk about. I have a format for them. And usually I say, okay, you can set the time. Like if someone's coming to therapy every other week, but they like the rhythm of a weekly discussion with their partner, then I say, okay, pretend that you're at therapy, give yourself an hour, set aside that time, but don't go more than an hour. Talk about the hard things, talk about the uncomfortable things, but that doesn't mean a nice dinner date can't follow it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to consume everything else.
Right. So a lot of times I just tell people, like, do a 30-minute check-in once a week and allow yourselves the time to talk about the hard things where you give each other some constructive feedback. Don't let that one conversation just ruin the rest of the week. Like, that's good information to share and know.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm switching gears here a little bit, but like how are we doing on time?
We're at 30 minutes, so we'll probably need to wrap up soon.
Okay. So
thanks, producer Hannah.
Then this is a good segue. What would you say people should look for when they're trying to ask themselves, is this really self-care or is this just self-indulgent?
Ooh.
And like feels good?
I would say self-care should be able to take place pretty regularly and consistently. I would say self-care doesn't have to be expensive.
I feel like that's a really good point to make in today's time.
And
you don't have to buy all the makeup and
Yeah.
facial things to have a good skincare routine.
Right, absolutely. Like, go if you have no skincare routine, just start with getting some cheap face wash and washing your face at morning and night. Moisturize, people, moisturize, and use sunscreen. Anywho.
Ooh, we should do that one other time. We should interview someone who works with skin.
Ooh, we should. Okay, so it should be able to happen pretty regularly and consistently. And I mean, like, anywhere from daily to weekly. Like, obviously, drink your water daily. But, like, wash your bedding and your sheets once or every 2 weeks.
Okay.
It doesn't have to cost a lot.
Okay.
It should feel like work. Like, I hate working out. I don't like doing it. I struggle to get there, or it's a challenge to get there. It's a challenge while I'm there, and I feel really good afterwards. It's not always easy to do those things. That doesn't mean everything's super hard. Making my bed, brushing my teeth, that stuff's pretty easy, but a lot of that is because I've been doing it for the majority of my life. It eventually becomes easy, but it's still important.
Yeah.
What about you? How would you separate those two things?
I think the same from what you said. I would say sometimes self-care can feel good. Like if my muscles are really tight and getting a massage is what's going to help. Sure.
Absolutely.
But that's not necessarily going to fix everything else in my life. I think my big question, like I was kind of saying earlier, I often ask myself is this to take care of myself or is this to avoid something?
Ooh,
like that's kind of the question I feel like I need to often just continuously check in of like, okay, this is something I feel like I need to do, but is it something I feel like I need to do because I actually need to do it or because it's sort of like an old habit that I'm still challenging right now?
I'm thinking about like, what are my indulgent forms of self-care versus my like good healthy ones.
So I'll confess some of mine if you confess some of yours.
I will. I absolutely will.
Okay, I already said Below Deck. I have that on all day, every day right now.
I know you do.
Maybe like with food, sometimes it could be, I have these two options, which no food is bad, right? But I could eat one of them, but the other one tastes better. And the other one, but the first one's maybe going to be better for my body in the long run. It'll give me more energy.
Right.
It's kind of like, that's
the nutritional values are different.
Yes. And let's see, let me think. Oh, I think I've mentioned this before, but I'll just say it again. I like my dark content. Like I like my radio rental podcast. I like my Something Was Wrong podcast. But those are things that either are an extension of work or just like dark and spooky.
Right.
And if I'm already having like a long day, that's just going to put me more into a dark place.
Right.
And that's not helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Those are good. I like
What are
those.
some of yours?
Baking is one of my super indulgent ones because it's avoidant. I love to bake. And I would normally, like, I really had to sit there and think it through because I enjoy baking. There's nothing about it that feels challenging to me. I don't mind cleaning up the kitchen. I don't mind going grocery
I
shopping.
wish I had that. Yeah. Okay.
I love doing that, but I will absolutely choose to bake something before I sit there and like go clean the house or do the emotional work. So I would say that's like one of my indulgent ones, but I'm not going to give it up.
Please don't.
So I enjoy doing that.
So whenever you bring cookies to the office, I need to be like, Josie, what's going on?
Yeah, possibly. Like, it's like, hey, Josie, did you do your notes, or, you know, what are you neglecting? Is your car clean? Probably not.
As I eat the cookie.
Yeah, that's right.
Not mad about it.
That's right. I would say like reading books or watching TV, anything that is more avoidant, and I just disassociate because I want to escape my reality. Love TV. I love books though. Sometimes my like, I don't have ADHD, but like I don't have the attention span long enough to focus on a TV. So there's that. The one thing I'm super bad at is I will overbook and overcommit myself to make myself busy. I say that I have a hard time saying no, which is true, but I am this weird combination of extrovert and introvert. But I think when I'm most extroverted is when I am probably trying to avoid something versus when and then I burn myself out, or I get incredibly sick, or I'm irritated and irritable with people. And what is actually happening is I've neglected myself and what I actually need in that moment. Like my house feels chaotic. My car feels chaotic. I've only been eating out. I have spent way too much money. Rather than sitting there and being like, hey, why don't you just take that alone time and do some mindfulness and like explore your emotions and figure out what is going on that like you're not wanting to
slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not wanting to slow down because you might have to face whatever it is.
You know, it's something too I didn't think about, but like it is kind of funny how my perception of things when I'm in a good place is very different. Like my house is messy. I don't care. I'm happy. My house is messy and I'm not feeling good. It's like, this is a terrible place I live in right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those would be my indulgent things.
Okay. Thanks for sharing.
So what is the one healthy self-care thing you're going to do today?
That's a good question.
Do you want me to answer first? I can tell you what mine is.
Yeah.
I'm going to the eye doctor. I've not been to the eye doctor in years.
Yeah, that's a really big self-care thing that I feel like I'm like, go to the doctor, go to the dentist, go to whatever you need for your body parts, take care of them. I love that.
I have not gone. I don't know why. I'm not averse to going to the eye doctor, but I haven't been in years.
You need some new cute glasses?
I don't. I'm going to see if I even need them.
A little treat?
Maybe.
A treat of
maybe.
new glasses.
I hope not. I don't really want to pay for glasses, but I will if I have to. Because self-care, man.
Wait, do you wear glasses?
Not anymore. Because we don't read out of books as much, like in grad school.
Oh, you mostly need just like reading.
My eyes don't focus is the problem. They just like to strain.
Oh.
It's the only part of my body that likes working out.
Does it work okay with the Kindle?
Yeah, because I can change the font size.
Oh, okay. Guess I just learned something new about Josie.
Yeah.
I guess I'll drink water.
There you go.
Is it a cop out? I don't know.
No, I think you've admitted you haven't drank any water today except for to take your ibuprofen.
Yeah, to take my ibuprofen for the headache that I have because I haven't drank any water.
I'll be on your case about it. Don't you worry. Okay. Well,
thanks for chatting with me.
Same. Right back at you, pal.
Thanks for listening. Who was listening? Yes. I would love. Are we still on? I would love for people to comment and say their self-care things and their self-indulgent things. Call yourselves out.
Yeah, we want to hear. Just because they're self-indulgent doesn't mean they're bad. Maybe just do more self-care things.
Yeah, it's okay to do a little here and there.
That's right.
At least just be aware of it.
Awareness is a good place to start.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will see you next month.
Yep. In this place.